You're live.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know we have a few people that are probably going to come on this a little bit later. They have some conflicts, and so we'll just kind of move forward a little bit here before they come on. And but this is our orientation meeting for our Cedar Rapids Audit Committee, and I'm going to talk about kind of go over our charter a little bit, and so a lot of our new members can see that and have an understanding what's included on that. And so because a lot of our new members aren't on right yet, we will probably go, I'm going to probably show you where our budget information is going to be and where I will actually be presenting from, and kind of show you how our budget documents that we line item budget documents that we have out there and what they look like in the past, and how things are changed, and for our budget line item budget documents that we have out there today for people to be able to see. And so as of right now, I'm going to go out to our website, but I'm going to share my screen. And Justin, can you allow me to share my screen?
Should be able to, or is it denying you?
I'll try again. Host disabled participant sharing.
No, I didn't. Try that.
There we go.
Weird. Okay.
All right. So can you see the agenda on my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So now I'm going to go to the website. You see my website now, the school site? All right. So when you go to the school site, we're going to go to where it always opens up to a Board of Education. So we're going to go to Departments, Business Services, Accounting and Budgeting. That's where you'll end up going. You click on that, and you're going to where we're going to go is we're going to go to current year budget. Okay. So you're going to click here. And when on this page, I'm just going to point out a couple of things. We have our mission for the accounting and business, so to accurately reflect the district financial position to help the community to better understand the financial story of the district, as well as provide quality and efficient financial services that promote every learner future ready. Here's our contact information for our staff. Here is the financial integrity hotline. This is more, we talked, if you remember, some of you have been on the committee for a little bit. This is where we made it more prevalent. You can see that. You click on this for the financial integrity hotline. You can click on that. It'll take you to report any potential fraud or anything that you have concerned about. Our staff. Here is the financial integrity hotline. This is more, we talked. Justin, are you playing?
Oh, it's my bad. Sorry.
Thank you. Because I was like,
hey, the good news is you sound really good on YouTube. That's all.
Okay. So, and then you have a current year budget. Here's our CAFRs, previous year's CAFRs here. You have, we got 5 years here, then you can get some older ones beyond here. Then, but here's a budget. So we're gonna go to our current year budget. You're gonna see, instead of an archived line item budget book, which I'm gonna open up and have you kind of take a look at one. This is last year's, okay? We're gonna pull it up. And when you're, as a reader, looking at it, it pulls up the whole document. And then you're like, okay, it's 99 pages long, okay? And that's one of the things they're thinking, it's 99 pages long. How many people are actually going to go in and look at 99 pages? And so what we have out there today is much smaller, and we're hoping that that will encourage more people to look at it. But when you sit here, you're actually going down through and scrolling down to these pages, or going page down and going to each of the reports. So you can see it here. You read a letter about the budget here that Noreen has signed off on. You got the, all these different sections, the organizational area, and you see go down through and you read, and this is how it goes. And so it's not really user friendly unless you want to sit here and read page by page. And if you want to go to another section, it's not really easy for people to be able to jump to another section. It's just a scanned copy of what normally would be the book. That's here. So that's how this is all set up. Okay. And not real conducive to really easy for users. But there's a lot of the same information is here, but it's just harder to get to. And so in lieu of that, so I'm going to go back a screen here. In lieu of that, in lieu of that, close that down. You're going to go back to this screen here, which actually has links and it takes you to different sections. For example, I wanted to go look at management fund. I click on that. It takes you right to the management fund information. And it's very succinct, not overwhelming the amount of data that is here. But it does give you a feel for what's there. And it gives you a summary. And that's, it's the same way as you go to, now you're going to go to, instead of management fund, I want to go to debt service. Very quickly, you're going to get to it. And the overview, you'll get to that is organizational summary. You're going to get to that about our district and very quickly, and you can get to this stuff. So it's not overwhelming. And we reduced the amount of stuff that we got there so that people would have have an opportunity, and hopefully they would get to that better than on the big 99-page book. And so that's kind of the nutshell. And I'm waiting for more people to come on. And how many people are on now? We got Whitney, John. Okay, great. And Jason. Hi, Jason, Scott. Good morning or good afternoon. So now we do have some new people here. So I'm going to jump back and we're going to go take a look at our charter a little bit and talk about that, so some of our new people can actually see what's included in the charter and have an understanding how it flows and what subjects we'll be talking about throughout the year. Here you'll actually see in our information, here's our committee, but we're going to go down to our charter. And what I have here is our charter that we actually amended at our last committee meeting, and it will be going to our board for approval at the next board meeting. But I wanted to, I just pulled it out of what we talked about at our last meeting. Oh. And so this will also be found, will also be on our website. So that's a discussion as we get together as a full committee, whether or not we would need to include this in every packet, or if we just show you where it's at on our website and then save some information, because I'm not sure how often you guys look at this within every packet, or is it something that if you know where to access it, maybe we won't include it in the packet in the future, only on times that we're going to talk about it. So that's something we can talk about at the next meeting as well. But so here's the actual charter. And so obviously this is a board appointed committee. So it is a board appointed committee, which raises it to a higher level where we have to publicly publish our agenda and notify the media about that we are meeting. And that's why we're actually live today on YouTube, streaming this. And so that's why other non-board appointed committees, like we have a safety committee, for instance, that's not a board appointed committee. That is one that we don't have to publish our meeting agendas and all those types of things. But this one being a board appointed, we're required to do that. And so it talks about guidelines that we're going to do. We should appoint a chairperson who is included in our committee. that we talk about. It goes on and talks about the role of the committee. I think we talked about that a little bit last time. The audit committee will provide the Cedar Rapids District with practical means for the Board of Education to provide independent review and oversight of the district's financial reporting processes, internal controls, and independent auditors in district's process for monitoring compliance with laws and regulation. And it's also going to give us a forum separate from management, which auditors and other interested parties can discuss candidly open district concerns that they might have. So, and then the audit committee will also ensure the district management properly develops and adheres to a sound system of internal controls that and procedures are in place to objectively assess district's management practices, and independent auditors through their own review objectively assess the district financial process. The membership is a 3-year term, and then it's not there's no term limits. You can be on the committee for quite some time. We had a couple of people that have just came off that were on the committee for quite some time. And that the committee does have authority to investigate any matters within the scope of responsibilities. And these are some of the things they can do. They can recommend appointment and work product of an independent audit firm, which we do. The AUPs that we have been doing with our audit firm twice a year. That's goes through this committee. Resolve any disagreement between management and the auditor regarding financial reporting. Prepare all auditing and non-auditing services to be completed by external auditors. Seek any information it requires from employees, all of whom are directed to cooperate with the committee's request, and meet with the district management, external auditors, or outside counsel as necessary. Now, these are the litany of things that audit committee does throughout the year. And so there's 23 of them. And so I'm not going to read every one of them, but you can kind of get a feel for the types of things. You know, we have here discuss results of independent audits, AUP, which is audit activity funds audits. That's on here. Review the independent auditors' major concerns they might have on district's internal controls or any special audit steps in material control deficiency. Look at other risk, IT risk, insurance management risk, which we report on. This was just added last year that we added in our charter to receive updates at least twice a year for our MIP, which is our self-funded health insurance program that we're in with a consortium. That will be happening at, we'll do an update at our next meeting as well on that one. Typically that happens in September, but they had not yet met with MIP when we had our last meeting. And so that happened just after our meeting. So we'll actually bring this back to the committee next in November. Okay, guidance in the request for a new auditor. That happens, and we will be looking at that this next year, I believe. So we also have in here, we'll meet with our attorney twice a year. That happens every year. We always, the committee reviews the qualifications of the staff that's on our audit every year. We also have some language in here that talks about rotation, the audit partner responsible for our district audit. I think that is good. We've been with RSM or McGladdery for quite some time. And so if we've been with the same audit firm, it's great to at least we have a different partner overseeing our audit. Let me see here. Review independent auditors report any significant problems. What's the, they review with the committee if they had any issues, any changes to the audit plan, any disagreements with the management. It does outline that we will meet 8 times a year. Last year we were down 1 meeting because we had to cancel 1 meeting due to COVID when it first came out, and we had to cancel. I think that was our March meeting. We ended up canceling that one. Let me see here. Annually review its own performance, which we do that annually. At the end of the year, we send out basically a kind of a survey through what is that? Drawing the blank on the survey tool we use, but that's not real important. So now, and also appoint committee vacancies in the future. So that's it's on the charge for the committee. So that's the charter. Now we have the charter matrix. This actually lays out what we're doing, and typically when we do that. So it basically follows the charter numbering scheme here. We have like review and assess adequacy of the charter. Number 2, review, discuss district annual audit. That actually follows suit right down here. Every one of these, review and assess adequacy of the charter. All of these follow across. What's the objectives of each of them? What's the deliverable? And how frequently do we meet on it, and when will we meet on it? So I'm not going to go through these, but this is kind of how it all flows, so you guys can actually have an understanding on this. So you can see here real quick. Was it? MEP. We will have, typically it's twice a year, September and March. That's when we typically do it. Well, September wasn't quite ready yet, so that actually going to be November, and then we'll continue when we'll actually meet again with them in March to have a discussion about it. It also lays out meet with the attorneys. It's listed in here, but this kind of gives you a guideline on when we meet and about what. So when I set up agendas going forward, I do look at this every month to make sure I'm capturing the things that need to be on that month. So any questions about the charter or the, all right. So that's just kind of give you a quick overview on that. And I just wanted to make sure that you had an understanding how that worked. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to our website and go into the how do we get there. So I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to go to the home page. Let's just get out here. I'm going to go back to the home page. And get back in here. This is the home page of our board. So go back in here. You're going to go Departments and Services, Business Services, Accounting and Budgeting. Then you're going to go right here. Let me go back. So now let's go to where we're going to find the charter and charter matrix, because I think that's important for you to know where that's at. So we're going to go here. Board Appointing Committee. We're going to go our district, Board of Education. And we're going to go board appointed committees. And we're going to come over here, Audit Committee. And then you have the committee, the charter. And the charter is here. So this is where the new one, after the board approves it, we'll actually have this out here, the new one. And that's where you're going to find the charter and charter matrix. It's all here. So now I'm going to go back to Departments and Services, Business Services, Accounting and Budgeting, and we're going to go through the current budget year documents. So this is kind of where we, like I said, this is where we're going to go through everything about our current year budget, and there's a lot of historical data in lieu of the budget book like we have done in years past. This is going to be in lieu of that moving forward. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on organizational summary other than just to let you know what's out here. And you, when you have a little bit more time, you can kind of read through this. But enrollment right now, this is our fast facts. We have enrollment of 16,852. Right now, that was certified enrollment of 2019. Okay. Wow. And that's not the current enrollment right now. And that is our certified enrollment. And so in certified enrollment, it actually is due tomorrow for this year. So we have a governance of 7 elected board members. We do have 21 elementaries, 6 middle schools, 4 high schools, about approximately 2,600 staff. We have about 7,000 volunteers. Our free and reduced percentage, I just identified last year was 55.6%. And this year's annual budget is roughly 252, general fund budget is 252 million. Then you can kind of get a little breakdown about what we do offer. We actually have some magnet schools that we provide at Johnson, Kenwood, and Taylor, our elementaries, and 2 middle schools are magnets, Roosevelt and McKinley. We do have Iowa Big. It's an alternative project-based learning experience for high schoolers. And we also have our daycare that we do offer. So, go to page. So now then we have a Board of Education and our strategic plan. Okay, so this is we're actually talking about that and updating this as we speak at the district level. Then we go into the organizational chart. You can see Board of Education, Superintendent, Executive Directors here, County Department, all the Business Services Department, which is Nutrition, Purchasing, Buildings and Grounds, Transportation, Custodial Maintenance. And then you have Deputy Superintendent and everybody that reports to her. Here it lists out all of our high schools, middle schools and elementaries, and the principals who are here, they're listed here, and how they flow into the organization. So then you have some demographic information that's out here. I'm not going to go in here. You have enrollment numbers. These enrollment numbers are not going to match the certified enrollment numbers. These are students that are actually in the building, not necessarily certified enrollment numbers. You're going to see that our locations of all of our schools, where it's going to fall in our district. You're going to have projected numbers that we've got from RSP for our different levels. You have a summary, elementary, middle, and high school. You're going to have the high school facility as projected numbers and the boundaries. You got middle school projected numbers and boundaries, elementary projected numbers, and the highlighted areas are the elementaries that are potentially looks like growth areas. We have our elementary boundaries, which is a lot to fit. It's, here. Potential growth areas of our district is also listed here, and medium home values throughout our district. So that's what you're going to find in the organizational chart, not organization, the organizational summary. Then we're going to go into, our actual certified budget is listed here, and I'm not going to go into it, but it actually is going to show what our board actually certified. And this is what we actually have to send to the Department of Management after we certify, and we have to get take it to the county as well. And that's what you're going to see is the stamp from the county that they did receive our budget. And it's broken down to when we have our audit every year, what the auditors look at, they don't really look so much when they're determining if we exceeded our budget, the revenue side. They look at the expenditure side in these 4 areas: instruction, total support, non-instructional, and other expenditures. Those are the main areas they look to make sure we didn't exceed the budget. Okay. When they do their analysis. So that's our certified budget, and it breaks it down by the different funds that we certify. And then also have our debt that we have to pay as well. that's there.
Dave,
So then, yes,
Dave?
yeah,
It's Maureen. Before we
Yeah.
get any further, and maybe I missed it, could you define for our new members the term certified enrollment? Exactly
Yeah.
what it is, because that drives what money we get, correct?
correct. Every year, our certified budget, we actually have to certify a budget by April 15th every year. And that's something that's required. And but the thing is, at April 15th, a lot of times you don't know everything. You don't know how much you have. You don't have, a lot of times you don't have your negotiations done yet. A lot of times at that point in time, we don't know what our new money is going to be set by the state yet at that point in time. So there are a lot of unknowns. And there's two rules of thought when you do your certified budget. There's a rule of thought that you try to certify your budget to as the best guess that what you think that you're going to spend, and you try to be very accurate as much as possible. And there's another rule of thought out there that you certify high enough at the time you certify your budget so you don't ever have to amend your budget moving forward. And so you always have carryover funds. So you have your total maximum spending authority. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But you set your budget high enough in those areas so that you don't have to come back at a later date to amend, as long as you set it so that you're not setting your budget more than what you have a legal authority to spend. So that's the second rule of thought. We're kind of in the middle with what we end up certifying because we have a lot of estimates. We take a look at what we have in our budget, and our current budget system does show a lot of things, what we are spending, some categorical funds, we have carryover funds every year in that, but we always kind of budget that we're going to spend all that each year. And so it's kind of a hybrid that's kind of in that. But that's kind of what the certified budget is something we legally have to do. It sets what our taxations are going to be for the year based on what we put out there. Once you actually have to send out a notice to the public about your public hearing for your budget. And from the point in time that you actually put out your published budget, your budget can change. Your overall taxes from what you publish to what you adopt can change. The overall taxes cannot be increased. It can go down, but you cannot increase it. And so once you certify, then you get a request from the state. If, for example, there's an adjustment made by the state and it increased. We'll go into the budget development process, and then some of this is in here too. We'll talk about it. So we get into certified budget. You have your certified budget here and a line item budget. So our certified budget is what I've been talking about. And I've been talking about it's by the April 15th statutory deadline that we have to do that. And we have to certify by the county auditor. And we do have an opportunity. We can amend the budget as many times as you want, but you cannot amend anything after May 31st. That's the last time you'll be able to amend your budget. So,
But Dave, again, I'm sorry for not being clear. I don't know if everybody understood, or maybe they did, and I just want to make sure that people understand the term you use, certified enrollment, that it's captured on a certain day, correct?
yes.
Okay, and it doesn't have to do with after that day we report it to the state. 300 kids could come into the building the next day, but they're not included in that count, right?
They're not included in the count, but there is an avenue that you can get some additional authority to get those for those additional kids, and that's in a school budget, a review committee, modified allowable growth authorization. We'll talk a little bit about that later.
Okay, fine, thanks.
But that gives you an opportunity to get some authority back, but it doesn't, the money for those kids don't come till the following year.
Got it. Okay. I want to make sure people did understand that concept. Thank you.
Yeah. So, like I said, the certified budget is something we're required to do, and it's due by April 15th of every year. And like I said, these are the 4 categories, like I mentioned earlier, that it's the budgeted revenues considers federal, state, and local property taxes for all funds and is a basis for the budget. But here, budget categories, this is what we look at. These are the 4 categories that auditors say we cannot exceed these budgets. And when we amend our budget, you're only showing a condensed version of your overall budget. It's only these 4 lines that show up on your budget amendments. And these are the lines that you are amending. If you need to increase this area, you'll increase the instruction. If you need to increase other expenditures, you'll increase this area. And that's what you're going to put out there for your community to know that this is what you're increasing your budget for. And it's only in these 4 lines. The line item of the budget is a little bit different from the certified budget. The certified everything is rolled up into these functional areas. These are all called functional areas by fund. And the line item of the budget, we break it down line item by line item throughout the district. And that's something that we are constantly working on, and it changes throughout the year, our line item of the budget. So that's something that we're constantly working on. Here's our process that we go through. We're in budget development from June through March, for this year. We schedule a public hearing on March 9th. We published a proposal on March 25th from the paper. Our public hearing actually happened on April 13th and certified our budget on April 13th. We actually got it to the county by the 15th. This year, we actually had a budget amendment. We actually did that on May 11th, and we held our public hearing on May 25th, and we, at that point in time, then that's a lot of our, this actually amended our prior year, and then we start working on finalizing our line item budget by June 30th. Is what we really have shot for. Because of the COVID year, and then all of those changes, we weren't ready to have everything done for our line item budget by this point in time. And then, so that is something that we are continuing to, are looking at our process, because there's still a lot of unknowns, even by the time you hit June. You don't have all your new staff in and all of that. Those are things that continue to change, even after our budget books are printed in the past. There are a lot of changes that happen after that, because we do modify our budget on a monthly basis. So, and then we're going to continue to review our budget, and then we will through March of 21, and we'll continue to, if we need to amend our budget, we will amend again this year, and we have till May 31st to amend this year's budget to what we had certified. We go into laws. Who governs us? We have we're governed by the Department of Education, that we have to follow a lot of the guidelines from them, Department of Management, and Department of Revenue. Under the Department of Education, they oversee a lot of what we can spend things on, okay? And Department of Ed is where we go to Budget Review Committee, School Budget Review Committee, and they deal with our accreditation. And all of our payments that we get flow through the state, except for property taxes. All of our other money flows through the state. Department of Management comes into play. We send them our certified budget. They certify the property taxes. They receive information from the counties as well, and the valuations. And they are the ones that develop our aid and levy worksheet. That it's kind of the cornerstone of our general fund budget, is the aid and levy worksheet that we work through. Okay. Department of Revenue, how we deal with them is sales tax comes through the Department of Revenue to us, and income surtaxes. And income surtaxes are mainly, use that through PEPL and ISL, Instruction Support Levy. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the home rule how we can actually spend money and what laws and stuff we have to follow under the Code of Iowa is what these home rule, Dillon's Rule, home rule light. Typically, Iowa schools have for years followed Dillon's Rule. Dillon's Rule really is a legal doctrine that provides a narrow interpretation of authority. Districts may only engage in activity if it's specifically authorized by the state government. So we can only do things that they say we can do. But if you look at a home rule, this is what cities and counties, they get to follow. This legal construct allows city and county authority to act broadly, so as long as their actions are not prohibited by the state. So they have a little bit of different rule of thumb that they get to follow. But in 2017, they actually changed what schools have to how they have to follow. The schools now may exercise any broad and implied power not inconsistent with the laws of the General Assembly and administrative rules that impact school districts. And it says that the statutes relating to school districts shall be liberally construed, not narrowly, that's specific. This is a very narrow interpretation, is Dillon's Rule. Home Rule Light really is saying now schools, a lot of the things that they're been identified in the code, now things should be looked liberally to be looked at. And it's really hard to get a lot of changes in how things are being looked at because we're so ingrained in the Dillon's Rule and even interpretations by the state on different things are still they still look at the Dillon's Rule quite often. It's really hard to get them to open their minds on looking at things a little bit differently because now the code does allow for that. And so we are slowly being able to loosen up some of the things that we're able to do, but it's been a slow process. We're in 2020 and there still has not been a lot of changes in the interpretation of things that we're allowed to do. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time. And some of it, there's got to be a lot of people willing to push back on rulings or interpretation the states are doing. And that's kind of a slow process at this point in time. Any questions on the kind of the home rule, Dillon's Rule, and home rule light? Can we follow? Okay. And when we develop our budget, these are the main considerations we look at. We looked at the certified enrollment, including open enrollment and supplemental assistance, state aid that the state gives us. These are the main things that we look at for the general fund. Property taxes. We would like to maintain a consistent levy rate, and we also use the cash reserve levy to make sure that we maintain a strong financial solvency ratio as well. Some of the things that we go back to SBRC for additional authority, we do go back and levy for a lot of those. Tax-based growth. We continue to expect low to moderate property tax-based growth. That's what we've been used to, and we believe that that's going to continue. The general fund balance and spending authority. We want to make sure we have a strong fund balance and that aligns with we have the authority to be able to spend as well. Staff allocation. We do look at staff allocations all the time. We look at what our settlements are when we're trying to build our budget, estimate, and we look at our needs, and we always have a discussion every year about if we have a need in a different area, we talk administratively about increasing our budget in certain areas to be able to add additional staff. And sometimes that discussion also talks about reduction in the staff in different areas as well to make up room for other priorities. I did talk about the compensation. This year for FY21, it was our settlements. We landed on 1.9% increases in base on our wages, and so our general fund does salaries and benefits does account for 80% of our budget, is salaries and benefits. So that is the main driving force of our general fund is really salaries and benefits. There's not much left after for our budget beyond salaries and benefits. And we also look at categorical funding. You can see that close to 50% of general fund staffing are supported by revenues from categorical programs. That's a big part of our budget. And so we that can change from one year to the next year what programs we offer, because sometimes these numbers, general fund categorical funding goes away, and sometimes, and that's always a difficult time when things go away. Is can we afford to keep those programs?
Hey Dave, can you explain or give me a couple examples of what those are?
Categorical funds, Title I. Okay, Title I funding. We get a lot of Title I funding, Title IV funding. Title I funding is for reading and math support. A lot of it's reading support for schools that qualify, and you get a lot of Title I funds for that. You have our McKinney-Vento. It's a homeless funds that we get to help deal with some of the expenses in us supporting the homeless folks. A lot of that money goes toward transportation, because if you're homeless, say you were attending Jefferson, if you come homeless and now you are living with some friends in Central City, for example, you can choose to go back to Jefferson. And we are responsible to transport them from Central City back to Jefferson. So that's so homeless can be very expensive to support, and it's a lot of the money that we get from McKinney-Vento, which is not a lot. We get from McKinney-Vento. You're talking I want to say 40-some thousand, something like that. That's not a lot of money to support a lot of our needs that we have for our homeless. Other categorical funds look at, there are certain things that we have to spend money in a certain way. You have categorical funds to support professional development. Those are considered as categorical funds. And so that is some money that we get. We get a lot of our teacher leadership, funds that comes through our funding formula. And a lot of those are state aid money that's coming, that's paying for a lot of those positions. And so there are a lot of different categorical funds. Sherry could probably expand on what I have expanded, but those are some examples.
You did great, Dave. A couple of others drop out and at risk.
Yep. So, and even for us, we consider our instruction support levy kind of categorical funding that we get money. We have like 90-some staff are paid from that. We'll talk a little bit about that too later. Any other questions about the key budget development process? Like I said, certified enrollment, that actually happens October 1st is our count date, is for certified enrollment, and we have to get our numbers to the state on the 15th. There's still a lot of finagling with our numbers after September 15th, so it doesn't really get done closer to the end of the month. But we're supposed to say, here's our certified enrollment, but then there's still a lot of corrections that happen after that for a little while.
Dave, is there a rule that you need to amend the budget before you exceed your expenditures?
Yes, there is. Yeah, you're supposed to amend your budget before you exceed. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm assuming that obviously you're constantly monitoring that, and maybe it's even more hairy this year between derecho and COVID and
yeah, the areas, it's like I said, the areas that get concerned, because if you think about it, we have so many expenses that still incur, like for salaries and benefits, for example, they go clear out until July and August. So it does give us a lot of time to be able to make adjustments before we overspend. The area that is a little bit more concerning is if you in some of these other expenditure areas, if say, for example, we decided to issue some more debt and another project, and we didn't have it in our initial budget, and you start doing a lot of expenses, yes, you need to get that amended very sooner than later. because there could be a point that you push you over the what you have available in this area. So that is an area that probably has to be watched closer than, because you do have time because of expenses. The summer expenses, you have 3 months worth in June. Pretty much you expense in June. You have a little bit of wiggle room to be able to, if you amend in May, typically you're in good shape for most of these other areas. But this is an area that you have to watch a little bit closer to make sure that, like our construction, we estimate construction for Coolidge that's happening today. If it actually, we spend more than what we thought we would spend at this point in time, yes, that might be something we'll have to amend for that. All right. Any other questions before I go on? Okay. Now I'm going to go down into some of our financials here. So this is all funds. And we have schools. This is governmental accounting, kind of. Some of you accountants out there, we actually have governmental funds. We have 8 different fund types that we typically have for Cedar Rapids. We have the governmental funds. Those include the general fund, student activity fund, management fund, SAVE, PEPL, and debt service. Within the governmental funds, we also have special revenue funds, and they are our student activity fund and management fund. And with also the 2 types of government capital project funds that we have that flow into a capital project is SAVE and PEPL. Those are kind of capital projects. SAVE is, and PEPL kind of can be spent in the same way. There's for the same types of expenditures. You can buy buses and all both. You can buy, technology out both, and those types of things. And we do have, we'll talk a little bit more about SAVE later, how we tend to use SAVE funds here. We also have debt service as part of the governmental fund category as well. And debt service is our principal and interest payments run through debt service. The next group is our proprietary funds that operate like businesses. Okay, they are our enterprise funds, they're school nutrition fund, and our daycare funds are considered as the enterprise funds. So these report all year round. They report on full accrual all year round, but our all other funds are modified accrual, and so we only a lot of our year-end financial what we send to the state follows modified accrual, but what we do for our CAFR, there's a section of it that takes these to full accrual in some of the reporting. But what we send to the state follows modified accrual for this, full accrual for proprietary funds. And then we have a fiduciary fund to manage the other entities. We were actually managing our UEN accounts, and that ended this last year. They got rolled over to IASB. No, not IASB. ISFIS is taking that over. Are the UEN, so we no longer have any fiduciary funds that we're looking at. Now, this is kind of where everything rolls up into one fund. I mean, all funds. This actually kind of resembles what we have to certify our budget. All funds is what we certify. Here's the breakdown of everything that happened in FY20. You can see that in FY, you have all of our funds broken out here. And then you have the surplus revenues on top, expenses here, the changes here. And we'll talk a little bit about these deficits that we have here and why do we have those deficits. So we look at here the general fund deficit with basically $4 million. The main drivers on those deficits are these 2 main things. We have a special education deficit. It went from 9.2 million FY19 to 12.2 million FY20. That's 2.9 million. English language learners deficit, it went from 1.5 to 1.7. So about $300,000 there. That's the lion's share of this. There are some other things that we did this year, one-time expenditures that we actually bought $300 some thousand for some vans that we bought. We also had spent a lot of expenses for, we incurred in the process of starting a new implementation of a new software. That also contributed to our deficit in the general fund. But our save deficit, that can be explained really, when we look at revenue was 20 million, expenses was 24. A large part of that is because we issued bonds in 2019. We issued $25 million in bonds in 2019. So that is in our fund balance. So it's not been treated in FY20 as revenue. So that's why our expenditures exceeded our revenue by 2.3 million. It was for the expenses that we have incurred for constructing Coolidge, the new Coolidge elementary, or the new elementary on the Coolidge side, I should say. That's the reason why our save is showed a deficit for this year, meaning expenditures exceeded revenue for this year. Debt service, the reason why expenditures exceeded revenue for debt service was because about 3 million was because we actually had a reserve. We refinanced some bonds. We actually had a $3 million reserve of these $30 million bonds that we were required to set aside, because when we refinanced, we did not have to have a reserve. So we were able to use that 3 million to offset this 30 million, bring it down to 27 million for those bond refinancing. And that's why our expenditures, when we actually pay off those bonds, we had to pay off 30 million, but we only actually finance 27. So that's why our expenditures exceeded our revenue by 3 million.
Dave, that special education deficit, is that just a way to allocate and try to figure out why we're
Yeah, that's something that we actually, we'll talk a little bit more about when we get to the general fund, if we want to kind of hold that.
Okay.
When we get to the general fund. This one was really focusing, trying to explain when you see a deficit, why that was. We'll talk a little bit more about the English language learners and special ed when we get to the general fund. I'm going to kind of go back here. So this is kind of the breakdown of all of our revenue for all funds and expenditures. So if you look at all funds, you can see that 35% of it's local. A lot of that includes property taxes. Okay, so 43% is state, 6% is federal, and other financing sources includes like transfers, sales of assets, and those types of things fall in that area. Our expenditures, what's different is when you look at all funds, typically we talked about our general fund, 80% of our budget is for salaries and benefits. It's not 80% when you look at all funds. It's 40, so you're looking at 58% is salaries and benefits when you consider all funds, because some of our funds, like our PEPL and SAVE, do not have staff, so that pushes that down. But this is kind of how it breaks out. You can look at 11% purchase services, 5% for supplies, 2% for property, and others 24%. And that other also includes like interfund transfers and those types of things are in that. So here, you can kind of look at trends here. And what's highlighted here, you can kind of see what's going on here. So you can see our general fund went down from 32 to 28. Why? We talked a little bit about that $4 million drop. And also you have SAVE. SAVE typically, general fund is typically our largest fund. Okay, we say here, it's our highest fund balance, typically. But when we issue bonds for construction projects, that's when save will out surpass our general fund. And these are years when we have issued some bonds, back here and started doing some projects. Over for a period of time, save will exceed that's our general fund. But then here you can kind of look at where we've been for all of our other balances in the rest of our funds. So you can see here, we were very low in 2012 in management. Now we got pretty good fund balance in our management fund. Our activity funds has always been $1 million, $1.5 million. PEPL has grown over time because we passed the PEPL promise. And so we're actually getting more, we're going to the max in PEPL. That's why our balances have increased over the years. And our nutrition fund, what's important to note, nutrition fund, we have an asterisk here. Our nutrition fund, we had to start reporting our IPERS pension liability for our nutrition fund because it's a liability that is a long-term liability we have to book because we're on a full accrual for a nutrition fund. We like to back that out to see if we back that out, we always have the current year's liability in there. We always had that, but it's the long-term portion that we're required to book now. We'd like to take that out and see where we are without the requirement of us putting the GASB 68 pension liability in our numbers. So this is without the pension liability shown. The same thing is that for our daycare as well. We like to back those out because nutrition fund would still show a positive balance, but our daycare would actually, if we report our pension liability, it puts these in a negative. And that's one of the things that we don't want to do in our daycares is to try to fund our pension liability and try to put that on the backs of our families paying for daycare. That doesn't seem right. And so when we report and things like this, we always back that out. So now this is kind of our aid and levy. We take a look at a summary that's that we get from the Department of Management. And these are talking about a lot of our funding streams, where they come from. We have combined district costs, which is a big piece of funding our general fund. You have state aid. But down here, we're trying to highlight what is highlighted in yellow and what's in blue. The highlighted in yellow dollar amounts are board-approved tax levies. These are things that the board has control over, ISL and cash reserve levies, the management fund levies, the regular plant and equipment. These are all what we would consider a board-approved levy. And the levies that are voter-approved are the blue ones. That's our voter-approved physical plant and equipment levy, which can go up to $1.34, and that's what our voters did approve. For years, it was at 67 cents. And our debt service is our payment that we levy for bonds where we asked, GO bonds that we asked our voters to approve. This is actually our last year that we have that. All of the other bonds that we have outstanding are saved revenue bonds. All the other ones that aren't highlighted are state revenues that are done through the aid levy worksheet that pull through here. Everything else is we don't have any control over. These are all kind of come through the formula. Where are we at in total levies? You can see that we're at 53.36, and we have a total property tax dollars of 86.37 million, and utility replacement of that is 3.6 million. It brings up to $89 million of property taxes that we're levying. One of the things that you like to look at is how do we compare to others in property tax per pupil. Cedar Rapids, on average, we're at 343,000 property tax per pupil, which is actually below the state average. Okay, the state median is at 32,000. Median. The state minimum is 173,000, and the max is 1.4 million. That's valuation per student. I think this max one would be Okoboji, I believe, is the max. If you think about the district who has the most valuation per student. So that is a big, our taxable valuation per student really does drive what our levy is. And so that is a big part because we have schools that have pretty high property values. Their levy to fund their formula is much lower. And there's going to be another thing that we'll show when we get to general fund. You can actually see that better. But this are our overall levies. We can see that historically where we are above the median. And I think a lot of that is due to our valuation. What we also included in here was the impact on $150,000 house. And this is something we'll continue to do every year when we're looking at our overall levies. This year, because the rollback went from 56% of a residential property down to 55%. That's what you pay on your property, percent of taxes on your property. So if your property is valued 150, you only pay taxes on 55% of that value. And so that, and in reality, our levy increase from 1507 to 1536, but for a $150,000 property owner, they actually saw a decrease in their taxes due to schools. So here's another exhibit of where our total general fund levy is in our cash reserve levy and how much is funded through each of these components of it. So every year you look at our FY20 total general fund levy is 1507. It was comprised of these pieces. You can see that broken down. So our total general fund is went from 1151 to 1210. And this is how it's broken down. ISL, construction support levy, combined district cost, and our cash reserves levy. And here you can kind of see back here, voter approved, we talked about, this is when the voters agreed to increase it from 67 cents to $1.34. And so our PEPL dollars increased significantly at that point in time. Okay, I'm looking at time. What time do we have here? It's 1:04. Well, I'm going to go jump into some of the other funds right now because we got a lot to talk about here, but I want to get to the general fund and we can fly through some of the other funds very quickly. So I'm gonna go to the general fund now. How's the general fund funded? This is where we're going to say is we're funded, majority of our funding is between local property taxes and state, okay, 35 and 40%. You can break it out. Our total revenues are broken out in local, state, and federal. You can see the breakdown of all of these. Our local revenues is looking at going up about, 4.1 million. State is going up about 3 million. Federal is actually showing going down slightly, and our federal is what we have here listed at this point in time. That these numbers do fluctuate at different times, so we always monitor that stuff. Now we talked a little bit, are the general fund taxes, in the blue are the state aid revenues. From we had this shown earlier, but this is how these are general fund taxes, okay, that we get, everything, and state aid, okay. So all the state aid, you got our AEA flow through money, state aid, you got all this money that we get down here comes through the state, and we receive that in additional revenue. We got preschool money, it comes in teacher salary support. We have teacher leadership money. Our main foundation aid, our tag, we get that through the state, and it's broken out separately for us. And we have to count for a lot of these separately. When you have these numbers here, these are all things that we're required to count for a lot of these things separately. Foundation formula is not one of those, but all these other ones, we have to count for all our expenses and show how we spent that money. How is it used? You could say we use 80% is paid salaries and benefits for general fund. 20% is for curriculum, utilities, and other professional development, school bus fuels, and those types of expenses is the rest of our budget. So how our expenses break down, you can see this is by kind of functional area. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but you can see right now we're showing our expenses going from 218 million to 222 million for next year. And this is broken out by functional areas, object codes as well. Instead of by function, this is by object. Let me go down here. Key financial data here. I'm not going to go through all this. This is some nice data here. I'm going to go jump past this because a lot of this information we'll talk a little bit about, but this kind of breaks out a lot of comparable data. You can see our new money. You can see our unspent balances where we've been. You can see our budget enrollments is here. You can see our revenues and expenses are listed here as well. Our cash total solvency ratio is listed here. And so, but the main driving force for a general fund is really a certified enrollment. Okay. Legislature annually sets our supplemental state aid annually. And when they do that, it's based on, the state sets it, and the code actually says that they need to set 2 years. They haven't done that in years. They only seem to be doing 1 year at a time. And so, but because new money, they apply that to your cost per pupil, which is a flat dollar amount the state does, and they increase it by a certain percent, and you multiply that number times your number of kids. That's what you get your new money. Because we have a net out for a special open enrollment, we actually, our new money does drop. Okay, because our number one, we lost kids, so that impacted us. So the state said 2.3%. Our enrollment declined, so that dropped it to 1.77%. But because of our impact and changes in open enrollment, it went from 1.77 down to 1.76%.
Dave, I'm going to interrupt quick.
Yeah.
Just so our new members understand, the term open enrollment is that if one of our students who is in a Cedar Rapids school district wants to attend another school district like Linn-Mar, for example, and if they meet the criteria, then Cedar Rapids has to pay Linn-Mar their share of what the money they would get for that student. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, just so we understand what open enrollment is.
Yep. We lose a lot of open enrollment kids to Marian Homeschool. That is one of the big drivers too, is a Marian Homeschool program. And so this kind of talks about how the enrollment when it's taken. Okay, it's taken on October 1st every year. But what's important is the funding uses prior year certified enrollment numbers. So October 1 numbers that we had at October 1 funds determines our funding for our budget for FY21. Okay, that determines that. So we're always kind of a year behind, but we're going to go to about talking about allowable growth that we can get in a little bit here. So here's a little bit of detail here. We talked a little bit about our state aid was supplemental state aid was 2.3%. Our new money, because our enrollment decline, dropped it down to 1.77. But after we adjusted for our net enrollment out, we had 1,033. It actually dropped it to 1.76. So, and you can see the impacts of all of those figures from the years past. So like here was a year, our enrollment increased because we had a 4% supplemental state aid, but we had a new money of 5.3%. So that was a growth year. So spending authority is the maximum amount authorized, a budget amount allowed by the state. Okay, it's calculated basically taking your student count times the cost per pupil allocation from the state, and total spending authority is what you didn't spend the previous year plus the current year's authority. That gives your total unspent balance. And so it's the main pieces that it's amount. It's not an amount of money you have on hand, cash on hand. It's the amount that you have legal authority to spend in reality. And so it's the spending authority is really, most of it is formula driven. It really is. And so our regular program cost, this actually is a good exhibit that shows that everybody pays a uniform levy across the state. That's $5.40. That's what starts it. The state uses state aid to backfill the next 87.5%. It takes you up to 87.5% to get you that point is state aid. The remaining 12.5% is an additional property tax that to fulfill the cost per pupil, which is for this year is $7,048, and that's multiplied times certified enrollment. That's what gives us our enrollment. That's what gives us our money for combined district costs. So, for example, here this is Cedar Rapids School District. You can see that uniform levy generates $1.8 million, $1,854 per student. State aid says, okay, we got to give you another $4,313 to get you up to 87.5%. Now we got to levy $750 for a additional levy to be able to fund your district to get you full funded. But we also, there's some property tax relief that happens for those who have a generally poor property tax valuations. There's some additional money that comes into that. For Cedar Rapids, it looks like about $131. So if you take a look at this for a property poor district, this is, you have less, very uniform levy generates very little, then the state aid picks up more. And so then you still have some additional property taxes that you need to levy. But a property rich district, you can see that the state aid is reduced significantly, and they don't even get any property tax relief. And so this 800, even though this is a higher number, it takes less property increase in property taxes to generate the $881 that they have. So this is kind of a nice way to look at a property rich versus a property poor district. You can, there's only 3 ways to increase your spending authority. You can increase supplemental state aid from the state legislature, increase enrollment, or increase miscellaneous income. Miscellaneous income are things like tuition. Open enrollment is one of those, is a miscellaneous income. Tuition, grants, investments, interest of those types of things is what you increase your spending authority. We also receive additional funding to support our general fund for certain student populations. For limited English proficient students, LAP students, or ELL students, we get an additional 0.22 weighting for those kids above our regular 1.0 weighting. For special ed, we receive an additional weightings of 0.72 for a level 1, which is limited support that they need. Level 2 is a little bit more increased support that they need, and level 3 is the highest support level that we get funding for. And these are on top of the 1.0 weightings we get. The concept about the unspent balance and fund balance. Unspent balance, is the measure of spending authority reserved in the general fund that carries from year to year, and it's very important to measure the stability and a long-term budget sustainability of the district. It's like a prepaid credit card that you get loaded by the state. So there's your money and any savings that you might have outside of that. That's really kind of like, if you want to think about it in that way, is what you actually can legally spend. So here you have, historically, you can see our general fund versus our unspent balance. Unspent balance went from pretty good here back in 2012 and went down way low here in 2014. And then since then has been trending upward. Our fund balance followed that too, went from 11 to 3, and then started building back up. And so we had to, we actually had to do a lot of cuts because of this big rapid decline to 4.89 million. And that's very, very low for a school district Cedar Rapids size. And we had to make a lot of changes. And so you can impact that by cutting and then your expenditures to be able to build your unspent balance up. And the other piece that helps that, like miscellaneous income, we talked a little bit about that. But what helps this too is, you always get authority for your special ed and ELL deficits. That does generate authority, even though we're spending the money. But what we end up having to do here to increase our fund balance was cash reserve levies. We had to increase our cash reserve levies significantly to bring our fund balances back up. But we had a problem. We actually had, not only we were not in a good situation, our ending fund balance wasn't negative, but it was getting really low. And our unspent balance wasn't negative, but it was getting really low. That's the worst spot that you want to be in. You really want to be in have a positive fund balance and a positive unspent balance. This is where you want to be in. And we are there. We are positive, and we are at a level that is in a good position today. But unspent balance is what we have legal authority to spend, and our fund balance is where we're at. And one of you might ask, why are we having a fund balance greater than what we can spend legally? Part of that is for cash flow purposes. We don't get funding in June, July, or August for our expenses, state aid. We don't get any funding at that point in time. We have expenses we have to pay out during that time. Having a solvency ratio, fund balance at this level does help us meet our expenditures over the summer. And that is one of the big things that we have. A lot of times in years past here, when we were back in here, we had to borrow money to make payroll in the summer. And through anticipatory warrants types of the program to make payroll in the summer. And then we'd pay that off shortly thereafter once the state aid money started coming in. When we're at these levels, we don't have to borrow money to make payroll in the summer. So that's part of the reason why we have a stronger fund balance than our unspent balance. One of the other big things that we look at quite a bit is our solvency ratio. Okay, our solvency ratio is a big, it actually is something that determines our financial solvency of our district, how strong our district is financially. The goal really is between 5 and 10%. Is what, and that kind of flows what the Iowa Association School Board recommends. Okay, they recommend a 5 to 10% solvency ratio, and where we fall, this is kind of an area where we fall is that the Iowa Association School Board puts out. We really want to be in this area the best, and we are there right now. Our solvency ratio is 5 to 15%. We're in that range, and our unspent authorized budget is in that range as well. So we are in this area. That's where we want to be. But the thing is, what do you see? You see it going down a little bit. Okay, we were at a high of 14.7. Now we're at 15.59, and part of that is due to our special ed deficits that we had. That actually comes out of the year of when expenses are. We're showing that we spent more than what we're bringing in for special ed, but we're able to levy for that for the following year to get that back. And so then we always do that. So that's why you see a big drop, because that was a big increase this year for our ELL and special ed deficit from the prior year. And we also made some health insurance changes that also we knew we would take a hit for a little while from that, because we equalized our benefits for all employee groups. And in doing that, it did cost us some additional money, but I think it was the right thing to do. And we're monitoring that to make sure that we can keep ourselves, we always want to try to keep ourselves above the 10% mark. That's what we're striving to keep. If we get down below that, we'll have to make some changes to make sure we get back above that. And it's one of those things that we need to keep that on, because bonding companies do look at that, and our solvency ratio, that's a big piece in keeping a strong a bond rating. We talked a little bit about property taxes here. You can see our general fund here that's broken out, how much we're generating through general fund property taxes. It's $67 million total in property taxes. We have utility replacement taxes that come through our levy as well. So a total of $70 million. You can see where we're at here. We're above the medium. And like I said up here, we're above medium due to lower property valuations. So that, I mean, that's in comparison, because we're the slide that we showed before, our assessed valuation per pupil, we're below the state average. So we also have our these are colored by the banded areas down below. So you got 50, you got green here, yellow, and blue, talking about all these different things: combined district costs, instructional support, and cash reserve levies. You come down here, combined district costs. For FY21, it's $9.39 per assessed valuation. It generates approximately $53 million, that levy does. And so we are above our levy rate is above the state average because lower property tax valuation per pupil. Our ISL, instruction support levy, is a levy that we do. It can be a board approved or a voter approved, and it's a 5-year. If it's a board approved, it's a 5-year levy. If it's board approved, if it's a voter approved, it's 10 years. If it's board approved, it's a 5-year. And in Cedar Rapids, we've always done 5-year levies, and we're actually in the process of doing that as we speak. But it generates about $8.6 million, and it's funded in combination of a combination of state income tax and property tax. For over the income tax, we've always had a 5%, but and you can only, and this year it dropped to 4% because 5% actually generated too much, and we had to lower it to 4%. So our property tax portion actually increased versus what it typically would be, but our income tax dropped to 4% from 5%. And you can see generally the median is at 4%. So we're right on what most schools who have instructional support levy do. The important thing to note is we do fund a lot of staff with that. We really do. And it is something that we rely on. And if we didn't have this would be very hard to recover for not having this levy. We had to cut, like I said, $8 million, and we cover a lot of staff with that. Not only do we cover salaries and benefits, we also cover a lot of other technology and curriculum materials. All our curriculum materials are funded through ISL. Cash reserve levies. You can have, there are two components for cash reserve levies. You got cash reserve levies that give you authority, and cash reserve levies that are for cash flow purposes only. Authority-backed levies are things like special ed deficit, where you run a deficit in special ed or ELL or LEP students, you get increased authority. On-time enrollment funding. Maureen, this is what we were talking about earlier, on-time enrollment funding. That is something that when we are serving kids that come in after our account date, that say we had an influx of 200 kids that came in after count date and we had to serve, we can actually get additional authority generated by that. And that's called on-time funding. And that also changes in additional open ruled out after count date. You get additional authority to recoup that. And that is something that we have annually. The changes within ours is really more on the open enrollment side of stuff, but that is something that we're able to get some additional on-time funding or authority for that to be able to support those kids in the current year. Even though you don't have funding in the current year, you get the authority, and then you can go out and levy for if the board chooses to do so.
And that authority comes from the department, the committee within the Department of Ed, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
One other last piece that you can go to School Budget Review Committee is for infrequent and unusual circumstances impacting the need for additional spending authority. Those are very unique things that you can go to the School Budget Review Committee and ask for authority for. The COVID, for instance, we got some money from the feds to help us support of our expenses for COVID. If we actually incur more expenses than what we receive money for to help us offset some of the expenses, that would be something that I would say is infrequent and unusual that we would be able to go to the SBRC for and say, we want some additional authority for these expenses that we incurred above the money that we received from the feds to support that. And we would like some additional authority to back that. That would be a circumstance where we could go back and get some additional authority. Now there is but when you do a cash reserve levy, all these flow through cash reserve levies. There is a statutory limit. Okay, there is a statutory limit. The statutory limit for a cash reserve levy is 20% of the prior year expenditures less the unreserved fund balance of that year. So that's the maximum amount you can go. And for FY21, we actually had a cash reserve levy of 14.1 million, but the maximum amount that we had was over 15 million, was the maximum amount that we could have asked for. So we were under our maximum this year of what we levied, but because we could have gone up to, when we did the calculation, we could have gone up to over $15 million. So our overall levy for cash reserves, this you can see our history here. We were at 277, went down a little bit. Now we're at 244. Where the maximum amount is 510 across the state. I'm not sure what district that is. The medium is 0 minimum. The medium is 49 cents. So we are above that. And a lot of the driving force of that is our deficits for ELL and special ed or LEP. Special ed, you can see this, our deficit or our trend. Our trend is going up. We had a deficit of 3 million here, and it's at 12 million. We have a lot of needs that we're trying to deal with in special ed, and it's very costly to help try to support them. And you can see that, and you can see our level ones numbers have increased. Our level ones, that's the lowest level of weighting that we get, support. And which also lowers the amount of state aid that we get. And so and that kind of lines up with why we actually have higher deficits, because the money we get from level ones, there's additional costs to support that, but we don't get a lot of additional money to support them either. So, but like I said, our highest need is a level 3. That is our highest need, and that's our lowest population, but those are high dollar kids that we are supporting on our level 3.
Again, Dave, are you saying that level 3 are the lowest population of the other?
Yes, yeah, we have 367 students in FY20 as the level 3, and it had been up to level 4. And some of that, when we're actually looking at weightings, there was a change on how you had to determine the level of weight, the weightings, and actually it drove more funding kids to a level 1, level 2 from level 3. So our numbers from level 3, it's harder to get to a level 3 weighting than it used to be. And so, and that's partially why our deficits are increasing, because, the number of kids have increased too, but our weightings, a mixture is a lot different than what it was back in say FY16. And so that's one of the driving forces for our deficit as well. ELL is the same type of a thing. We have a lot more ELL students than we had, and it costs more money to support ELL. And so we can see we went from $600,000 to $1.7 million in our ELL deficit for FY21. So, and this is what we levied, that we're levying. This is what we would probably end up levying in next year. So, all right. So that's general fund. That's a lot, and we're pretty much out of time. But you can go through a lot of these other funds and kind of get where we're at. For example, save funds we talked about. You can kind of see more information about save funds. How is it used? We spend a lot of our money on facility infrastructure today. That wasn't so much when we first started on SAVE. New construction, that's what we're kind of looking at right now. Back in the day here, we did spend a lot of facility upgrades. We did a lot of upgrades, but not new construction and acquisition upgrades. We were doing a lot of geothermal upgrades when we first got the money. And we do most of our new construction versus upgrades. Most of our upgrades and stuff like that we're doing is out PEPAL funds. So you can see technology, pretty strong throughout. Leases are very, flat, not much vehicle repairs. We do a little bit with that. We do a little bit of facility planning, but property tax relief. We did $40 million of property tax relief over a number of years, and that has ended now because now we're focusing on new construction. And that's what SAVE is kind of being used for. You can see the different, our plan, for the facility master plan. Looking at constructing 2 elementary schools to replace these, renovating these 3 elementary schools, and phasing out these elementary schools. You can see the breakdown of all our SAVE funds and our balances. Like I said, the driving force of this balance is because of this balance here is because of our issuance of $25 million of bonds for the elementary on Coolidge. So, management fund, it's all property tax driven. PEPAL funds, all property tax driven. Debt service is what's listed here is GO bond debt that we have. But when you look at all of our expenses, you have a lot of this the revenue is very little, $4 million compared to expenses. A lot of that comes through this other financing sources. Our refunding of the bonds, our other transfers in, which is actually transfers coming in for payment of debt. It comes in, we have payment, all debt has to be paid, all debt service. Some of it's backed by SAVE funds, some of it's backed by PEPAL, and all of that has to flow into a transfer in to make those debt payments come out of debt service. So here's our nutrition fund. You can kind of see where our fund balances have been in nutrition fund over the years. Like I said, during here, we had some notes here about the COVID impact. Where was that at here? All the meals during COVID were funded under ESSER. So if you look at federal money sources here, FY20, that's why this number is it's higher, because that came in as federal funds. So, let me see here, and daycare funds. You're going to see a little bit of the same thing. Federal. Our daycare funds, we actually have 2 daycares. We operate one for Collins Aerospace, and we have our 5-season daycare, and they're combined under this program. And so we can see that we have about 4.6-7 million dollars a year is our daycare expenses. So, it funds these 2 programs. It's self-supportive. doesn't receive any financial assistance from any district funds. This was a little unique year. We actually did support the daycare funds with some of the CARES Act money because of lost revenue, and that was allowed through the CARES Act money. So there was some transfer of funds to help offset their expenses they incurred. So that is a very, very quick overview. I hope that was beneficial. But this data will always be out here for you if you want to go back and look and read up on any of these funds. We tried to make it concise, and hopefully it's clear enough in here, the points that we're trying to make. And any feedback that you'd have, I would welcome. If we would think we need to expand on anything in here, we'd like to hear that to help the general public to understand a little bit more as they're going through this. That'd be very welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
That's all I have.
Right. Thanks, Dave. This is very helpful.
And to new members, we aren't going to be asking you to make big decisions based on what you saw today. Correct, Dave? I mean,
Correct.
So don't get panicked like my first year. I thought I needed to know all the names of taxes and things. So it's good for background.
It is just background information, just kind of have a understanding how school finance works a little bit. And so I know there's a lot of information there, but I just kind of want to give you a little background. And having this out here, I thought was a good way that you can always go back and kind of read up on the different funds and how, where the money comes from and how it flows through. So
Until next month.
Yep. Till next month.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Dave.
everybody.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye.